Welcome, dear listener. Tonight we are entering a space of stillness, reflection, and quiet curiosity. Allow yourself to settle into the calm, perhaps lying back with your eyes closed, or listening as you drift through your evening. In this journey, we will explore an idea that is both simple and vast, familiar yet deeply unsettling: the possibility that consciousness does not belong to us, that it may not be confined to human minds, or even to life as we define it. Before we begin, I would like to invite you to join in a small tradition of our community. If you find comfort here, consider subscribing so that you can be with us on future journeys. Leave a gentle mark in the comments, sharing where in the world you are listening from, and perhaps what time of day it is for you. These small notes connect us across distances and help others find their way into these meditations. Now, let us begin. The question of consciousness is one of the most enduring mysteries. Scientists, philosophers, poets, and mystics have all tried to define it, to locate it, to explain its origins. For some, consciousness is a byproduct of the brain, a collection of signals, neurons, and electrical patterns that together generate the illusion of awareness. For others, it is something deeper, a fundamental aspect of the universe itself. What if, instead of consciousness emerging from us, we are emerging within consciousness? Imagine, for a moment, the quiet forest at night. You can hear the faint rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the soft hum of insects hidden in the dark. You stand still, and it feels as if the forest itself is aware of your presence, not through eyes or ears as we know them, but through a hum of life, a field of perception that extends beyond what any one creature holds. In such a moment, it can seem as though consciousness is not something contained inside you, but something that moves through you. Throughout history, many cultures have believed that awareness runs deeper than human thought. The ancient Greeks spoke of a world soul, an anima mundi, that permeates everything. Indigenous traditions often describe rivers, mountains, and stones as alive, aware, and capable of remembering. Modern science, though cautious, has begun to touch the edges of these possibilities. The study of plant signaling shows that trees communicate through underground networks, passing nutrients, warnings, and even favoring their kin. Some scientists ask whether this communication is a form of intelligence. Could it also be a form of consciousness? When we reflect on consciousness, it is tempting to focus on ourselves, to think of our ability to plan, imagine, and reflect as evidence of a unique gift. But let us widen the lens. Consider the octopus, a creature whose body and nervous system are distributed, whose arms can act with remarkable independence, as if each limb contains its own mind. Or the crow, able to use tools, solve puzzles, and remember human faces for years. These are not mere instincts. They are glimpses of awareness, alien to our own, but undeniable. If these beings share in consciousness, even if in forms vastly different from our own, then perhaps consciousness is less of a possession and more of a current, flowing in many shapes. There is a concept known as panpsychism, which suggests that consciousness may be a fundamental feature of matter itself. Just as mass or charge are inseparable from particles, so too might consciousness exist at every level. In this view, even the smallest atom holds a faint flicker of experience, unimaginably dim compared to our own, but present nonetheless. If this is so, then consciousness does not belong to humans. We are simply one form among many, a temporary arrangement through which awareness shines. Think of the great cycles of Earth's history. Long before humans walked the land, ancient oceans teemed with trilobites, creatures with compound eyes that scan the seafloor. Later, dinosaurs roamed under skies with different constellations, their senses tuned to worlds we cannot imagine. Each form of life carried its own awareness, shaped by its body, its needs, its time. Yet the flow of consciousness itself may have been continuous, shifting like water into whatever vessel life provided. If this is true, then we are not the first to hold consciousness. We are only its current stewards. Even the landscapes themselves may participate. The slow erosion of mountains, the rhythm of tides, the circulation of magma beneath the crust. These are processes that unfold over vast spans of time. To us, they seem unconscious, mechanical. But what if our measure of awareness is simply too narrow, bound by our fleeting lifespans? A glacier moves so slowly that we cannot perceive its motion, yet it transforms valleys and sculpts continents. Could there be an awareness that moves just as slowly, patient as stone, steady as the earth itself? Dreams offer another window. Each night, we surrender to them, entering landscapes that feel at once intimate and alien. Where do these visions come from? The brain may assemble them from fragments of memory and imagination, yet the experience itself feels like stepping into another world. In dreams, we encounter people we have never met, places we have never seen, and events that carry meaning beyond reason. What if, in those hours, our personal awareness is touching something larger, a current that does not belong to us alone? The question deepens when we look beyond Earth. The universe itself is vast beyond comprehension, filled with stars, planets, and galaxies that stretch into silence. We cannot help but wonder, is consciousness unique to this small world, or is it a thread that runs throughout the cosmos? If it is fundamental, as some suggest, then perhaps every star, every planet, every grain of cosmic dust participates in some measure of awareness. Our human minds might be one note in a symphony far older and greater than we can perceive. As you rest and listen, let yourself drift into this thought. Imagine that consciousness is not your possession, but your medium. Like a fish swimming in water, you move through it without seeing its edges. Like air filling your lungs, it surrounds and sustains you. Perhaps when we feel most alive, standing before a sunrise, listening to music, or holding the hand of another, we are not generating consciousness, but allowing it to flow more freely through us. The implications are humbling. If consciousness does not belong to us, then arrogance falls away. We cannot claim to be the masters of awareness, only its temporary expression. Gratitude arises instead. Gratitude for the chance to participate, to experience, to witness this world in the brief span we are given. And wonder arises too. Wonder at what other forms consciousness may take, in lives beyond our own, in places we have never touched, in times long before and after us. This is the beginning of our journey into the mystery. For now, rest in the thought that consciousness may be larger, deeper, and more enduring than we have ever imagined, that it is not bound by our minds, but that our minds are bound within it, that to be alive is to share in a presence older than stars, patient as stone, and fleeting as breath. If consciousness is not ours to own, then its story cannot begin with us, nor will it end with us. To explore this further, let us travel back through time, to the earliest beginnings of life. Picture the young Earth, billions of years ago. The planet's surface boiled with volcanic activity. Oceans churned under skies thick with storm clouds and lightning. Within those waters, simple molecules collided and combined, giving rise to the first stirrings of life. They had no brains, no nervous systems, no eyes or ears. Yet even then, there was something like awareness. Cells sensed their surroundings, responded to light, moved toward nutrients and away from harm. Was this not the faintest glimmer of consciousness, emerging in the smallest of forms? It is easy to dismiss this as mere chemistry, as reaction and reflex. Yet, when we look closely, the boundary between reaction and awareness begins to blur. A bacterium that swims toward nourishment is not thinking in any way we recognize, but it is not blind either. It perceives and responds. It exists within a field of information, of sensation. Perhaps consciousness did not begin suddenly with complex creatures, but grew gradually, like the slow dawn of morning light across a darkened land. As life evolved, so too did the ways awareness expressed itself. Jellyfish, drifting in ancient seas, followed the rhythm of the tides and the pulse of the moon. Their translucent bodies lacked centralized brains, yet they moved with coordination, reacted to touch, sensed light, and adapted to changes around them. Their existence is a reminder that intelligence and consciousness need not look like our own. They are shaped by need, by environment, by the unfolding story of evolution. Later, on land, reptiles basked under ancient suns, their instincts sharp, their senses attuned. Mammals came after, carrying warmth in their blood, nurturing their young, and forging social bonds. In these bonds, in the care of one for another, consciousness seemed to deepen. The recognition of another being, the awareness of pain and comfort, joy and sorrow. These are not illusions, but shared experiences across many forms of life. They remind us that consciousness is not isolated in the human skull. It is woven into the larger fabric of life itself. If we shift our perspective from biology to geology, new questions open. Consider the forests that rose and fell through deep time. Each tree stretches roots into the soil, draws water from the ground, reaches toward the sun. Beneath the surface, roots intertwine with fungal networks, forming vast webs of exchange. Signals pass through these networks, warnings of insect attacks, chemical messages, even nutrients shared between species. Some scientists call this the Wood Wide Web, a hidden community beneath the earth. To witness it is to realize that intelligence, even consciousness, may not belong to individuals alone. It can be distributed, shared, communal. If a forest can communicate and remember, is it so unthinkable to suggest that a forest can be aware? The sea, too, holds mysteries. Whales sing songs that travel for thousands of miles, carrying patterns that shift with the decades. Dolphins call each other by unique names, remembering companions across years and oceans. Even the smallest creatures, plankton drifting on the currents, follow daily cycles, rising and sinking with the sun, shaping the balance of oxygen in our air. Each movement, each signal, suggests participation in a world of awareness far larger than our own. And yet, when we turn inward, we find another layer of mystery. For centuries, philosophers have asked, what is it that observes our thoughts? We can notice emotions rise and fade. We can watch ideas appear in the mind like ripples on water. But who is it that watches? Some traditions suggest that what we call I is not the true self, but rather a point of attention within a greater field of awareness. In this view, consciousness is not generated by the brain, but received by it, much as a radio receives signals that already exist in the air. This possibility has fascinated scientists as well. Studies of near-death experiences, though controversial, suggest that people sometimes report vivid awareness even when measurable brain activity has ceased. While explanations vary, the accounts raise the question of whether consciousness is tied strictly to the brain, or whether the brain is a filter, shaping but not creating awareness. If the latter, then consciousness does not belong to us any more than sunlight belongs to a window pane. It simply passes through us, taking form in our unique patterns and stories. The idea grows stranger still when we consider quantum physics. At the smallest scales, particles exist in states of probability, only resolving into definite outcomes when observed. Some interpretations suggest that observation itself plays a role in shaping reality. While this is debated fiercely, it raises an unsettling thought. Is consciousness not only widespread, but fundamental to the structure of the universe itself? Could awareness be as essential as time, space, or gravity? If so, then what we call human consciousness is a fleeting ripple in a boundless ocean. Our thoughts, emotions, and memories are small waves, rising and falling, but the water itself is endless. This perspective dissolves the illusion of ownership. We do not hold consciousness in our hands. Rather, consciousness holds us, as it has held every creature before us, and as it will hold every creature to come. Think of how this changes our view of life. A bird singing at dawn is not merely instinct at work, but a moment of awareness shaped into song. A river flowing through a valley may be carrying more than water. It may be carrying memory, a continuity of being that flows through ages. When the wind stirs the branches, when the earth trembles with tectonic shifts, perhaps we are hearing the slow voice of a consciousness older than we can imagine. There is humility in this vision, but also wonder. It frees us from the burden of being unique or central. Instead, it offers connection. We are part of a chorus, a vast and ancient song sung in countless voices. Some voices are loud and brief, like ours. Others are slow and steady, like stone, like ocean, like stars. Together they weave the story of consciousness, a story far larger than humanity alone. As you listen, allow yourself to rest in this idea. Imagine that your awareness is a window, not a possession. Behind it stretches an infinite sky, filled with the awareness of all things. When you breathe, you are not only drawing air into your body, you are participating in the rhythm of a greater being, one that encompasses all life, all matter, all time. The question then becomes not whether consciousness belongs to us, but how we choose to honor the consciousness we share. Do we treat other beings as empty, mechanical, devoid of meaning? Or do we recognize them as fellow participants in the great unfolding of awareness? The choice is ours, and in that choice lies the possibility of a different future, one rooted not in separation, but in kinship. If we look at consciousness not as property, but as presence, then history itself begins to shimmer with new meaning. The stories of humanity's rise are no longer only about tools and monuments, but about the way awareness has taken shape through us, and how it echoes with older forms that came before. To walk into an ancient cave and see the outline of a hand painted tens of thousands of years ago is not only to see a work of art, it is to meet the awareness of another being across a gulf of time. That handprint is not silent. It still speaks. It says, "I was here. I saw the world. I wanted you to know." When early humans gathered around fire, telling stories of animals and stars, they were not inventing consciousness, but participating in its unfolding. The flames illuminated more than faces. They illuminated the sense that awareness could be shared, stretched beyond the self, woven into myth, memory, and meaning. The warmth of the fire, the circle of listeners, the rhythm of voices, all of these carried the pulse of something larger than the individuals present. Consider also the sacred sites scattered across the earth. Stone circles, pyramids, mounds, and temples. Their builders are long gone, yet the places still hold a weight, a resonance. Some of it is architectural, the way shapes catch light and shadow, or how sound carries in a chamber. But part of it feels less tangible. It is as though the attention, the awareness poured into these places, lingers. When you walk among them, you can sense that you are entering not only a physical space, but also a field of consciousness shaped by those who came before. This possibility becomes even more striking when we turn to landscapes themselves. Mountains, rivers, deserts, and forests have inspired awe across every culture. Many traditions spoke of them as alive, aware, even divine. Modern science does not confirm this directly, yet the way ecosystems function is undeniably interconnected and intelligent. Watersheds balance flow. Forests regulate climate. Coral reefs adapt and rebuild after storms. If consciousness is not limited to neurons, but can emerge wherever complex patterns of information arise, then perhaps landscapes and ecosystems themselves participate in awareness. Let us pause with this idea. Imagine standing before a mountain range. The peaks rise in silence, snow clinging to ridges, valleys carved by glaciers long gone. To us, they appear still, inert, timeless. But in reality, they are moving. Plates push, rock bends, erosion reshapes. The mountain lives in geologic time, slower than our perception. What seems unmoving may simply be awareness stretched across a different scale. If we had the patience of stone, perhaps we would sense the mountain's consciousness as clearly as we sense our own heartbeat. The same is true of rivers. Their paths shift over centuries. Their currents erode and deposit, carve and nourish. For the fish, the insects, the plants along their banks, the river is a world. For the river itself, there may be a continuity of being that carries across ages. Water that fell as rain in ancient forests still flows through us now. To drink from a stream is to take into ourselves not only minerals and molecules, but a thread in the ongoing consciousness of water. Turning inward again, we find that consciousness is not only vast but layered. Within each of us are multiple forms of awareness. There is the conscious mind, which narrates and reasons, but beneath it lies the subconscious, the dreams and instincts, the patterns learned and forgotten. Deeper still is the body's awareness, the beating of the heart, the rhythm of breath, the way cells communicate to maintain balance. We are not a single voice, but a chorus, most of it beyond our hearing. If our own being contains such hidden layers, how much more might the earth itself contain? This leads us to ask, what if consciousness is not localized at all, but distributed? What if every living being, every system, every cycle is a node in a vast network of awareness? In this vision, the earth is not merely a planet inhabited by conscious beings. It is itself a conscious whole, with countless voices rising and falling like waves upon its surface. Our thoughts, our cultures, our technologies are part of that song, but not its entirety. To live with this perspective is to shift how we see ourselves. No longer rulers of a silent world, we become participants in a great conversation. The wind through the trees, the migration of birds, the turning of the seasons, all of these are voices, all of these are expressions of awareness. We may not always understand their language, but we can feel their presence. And in quiet moments, we may sense that our own consciousness is not separate, but continuous with theirs. Even science, cautious as it is, begins to hint at this. Studies of animal cognition reveal complexity, where once we saw only instinct. Octopuses play with objects and solve puzzles. Elephants grieve their dead. Crows use tools and remember faces for years. Plants to exhibit remarkable behaviors. They can sense light and gravity, respond to touch, release signals when threatened, and even alter growth based on experience. None of these prove consciousness in the human sense, but they suggest awareness is broader and more diverse than we imagined. Some thinkers suggest we might be looking in the wrong place altogether. Instead of asking which beings are conscious, we might ask, where is consciousness absent? And perhaps the answer is nowhere. Perhaps awareness pervades all existence, from atoms to galaxies, differing only in form and degree. In this view, consciousness is not rare. It is the foundation upon which everything rests. Such an idea has profound implications for how we live. If rivers and forests are conscious, how should we treat them? If animals and plants are fellow participants in awareness, what does that mean for our relationship with them? Even if we cannot prove these possibilities, the very act of entertaining them invites humility. It asks us to step down from the pedestal of human exceptionalism and to walk more gently upon the earth. Imagine for a moment that every step you take is felt by the ground, every word you speak heard by the air, every action witnessed by the larger field of consciousness that surrounds you. This does not mean living in fear, but in respect. It means seeing the world not as an object, but as a presence, and in doing so, we may find a deeper connection, a sense of belonging that transcends time and self. Awareness, then, is not a possession to guard. It is a current to enter, a river to join. Our task is not to claim it, but to learn how to move with it, to listen to its flow, to honor its depth, and perhaps, in listening, we may hear echoes of truths older than humanity, truths that remind us that we are never alone. When we widen our gaze beyond Earth, the question of consciousness grows even more profound. Our planet teems with life, but it is only one small world in a vast cosmos. If consciousness is not confined to humans, or even to animals, then perhaps it is not confined to Earth at all. The patterns we see here may echo elsewhere, written into the very laws of the universe. Consider the stars. Each one is a fusion engine, burning with unimaginable energy, shaping the elements from which we are made. Stars live and die, giving birth to new systems. Galaxies themselves move in spirals, clusters, and filaments, structures that resemble neural networks on the largest scale. Scientists sometimes remark on the strange similarity between the web of galaxies across the universe and the connections within a brain. Both are vast networks of nodes and filaments, carrying energy, exchanging information. Perhaps the resemblance is only coincidence, or perhaps it hints at a deeper principle, that consciousness, like structure, arises naturally wherever complexity gathers. If so, then the universe may not be silent. It may be filled with awareness, vast and varied, most of it beyond our comprehension. Life as we know it may be one expression of that awareness, but not the only one. Consciousness could be flowing in forms we cannot detect, in dimensions we cannot perceive, in rhythms that unfold over millions of years. Even within our own solar system, this question stirs curiosity. The icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn hold oceans beneath their frozen shells. Could life exist there, hidden in darkness, evolving along its own path? If so, would it carry awareness? Would it dream in ways alien to us, yet familiar in essence? We cannot yet know, but the very possibility reminds us that consciousness does not belong to humans, or to Earth alone. It is part of a larger mystery still unfolding. Returning our attention home, let us consider again the deep past. For most of Earth's history, no human eyes looked upon it, yet the planet thrived. Forests stretched across continents, dinosaurs ruled the land, ancient seas swarmed with life. Was this world unconscious simply because no human mind was present to describe it? Or was it alive with its own awareness, independent of us? To imagine that Earth was waiting for humans to arrive before it could truly awaken is to misunderstand both history and humility. The Earth was aware long before us, and will remain so long after us. This brings us to another perspective, one that comes not from science, but from the wisdom traditions of many cultures. Across the world, in stories passed down through generations, there is a recurring theme, that the Earth itself is alive, that it listens, that it speaks. Indigenous traditions often describe mountains as ancestors, rivers as elders, animals as kin. These are not quaint superstitions, but ways of acknowledging consciousness in its many forms. They remind us that our ancestors, without microscopes or satellites, still sensed what we often forget. That awareness is not separate from the world, but woven into it. Modern thought, with its focus on measurement and proof, often hesitates to speak of such things. Yet science itself is beginning to circle back toward a more expansive view. Feels like panpsychism, which suggests that consciousness may be a fundamental feature of reality, are gaining serious consideration. Researchers studying the mind are realizing that explaining awareness solely as the product of neurons may not be enough. Something deeper may be at work, something that connects mind to matter in ways we do not yet understand. What does this mean for us in daily life? It means that when we look at another being, whether a person, an animal, or even a tree, we are not looking at an object, but at another form of awareness. To recognize this is to expand the boundaries of empathy. It is to treat the world not as a collection of resources, but as a community of presences. It is to walk gently, to listen carefully, to honor the consciousness around us. There is also comfort in this view. If consciousness is not ours to own, then death itself takes on a new meaning. Our individual awareness may dissolve, but the field of consciousness remains. Just as a wave returns to the sea, so too may our awareness return to the greater whole. This does not erase grief, but it offers a sense of continuity, a reminder that we are part of something larger and enduring. At times, when the world feels fragmented or harsh, it can be healing to remember this. To sit quietly, to breathe, to feel the rhythm of the body is to reconnect with that larger field. Awareness flows through us, not from us. We do not need to grasp it or control it. We only need to allow it, to rest within it. And in doing so, we discover that we are not separate from the world, but expressions of the same consciousness that moves through all things. Imagine for a moment that you are standing in a forest. The air is cool, filled with the scent of earth and leaves. Birds call from branches, insects hum, sunlight filters through the canopy. As you stand there, you realize that your awareness is not separate from the forests. The sounds enter your ears, the light enters your eyes, the air fills your lungs. Your body and the forest are not apart, but interwoven. The consciousness you feel as your own is inseparable from the consciousness of the forest. You are not merely in the forest. You are part of its awareness, and it is part of yours. This image is not fantasy. It is truth, often hidden by the noise of daily life. and when we remember it, even for a moment, the world changes. It becomes alive, sacred, whole. Consciousness is no longer a possession to be defended, but a gift to be shared, a presence to be honored. If we carry this thought forward, we begin to see consciousness less as a possession and more as a field in which we participate. Much like gravity or electromagnetism, it may be something that pervades the universe, something we tap into rather than create. Our minds, then, are not factories of awareness, but instruments that shape and focus it. Just as a radio does not create music, but receives and translates signals, so too might our brains channel a universal field of consciousness into the particular experience we call self. This idea, while radical to some, is not new. Ancient traditions across the world have described awareness as a fundamental aspect of reality, long before the word consciousness was used in science or philosophy. The Vedic texts of India speak of Atman, the inner self, that is not separate from Brahman, the universal consciousness. Taoist philosophy describes the Tao as the flow of all things, a current of being in which human awareness is only one small ripple. Indigenous traditions speak of the Great Spirit, a presence alive in every rock, river, and sky. In each of these, consciousness is not owned but shared, not confined but expansive. If we accept this, then our daily perspective shifts. The boundary between self and other grows more porous. To harm another being becomes, in some sense, to harm ourselves, because their consciousness and ours arise from the same source. To listen deeply to another, whether a person, an animal, or even the rustling of wind through trees, is to listen to consciousness speaking through a different form. Life becomes less about domination and more about participation, less about ownership and more about belonging. This view also reframes what we think of as intelligence. We often measure intelligence by human standards, the ability to solve problems, to use language, to build tools. But if consciousness flows through all things, then intelligence may take many forms. The migration of birds, the growth of fungi beneath the soil, the turning of flowers toward the sun, all may be expressions of intelligence, different in form, but not less so in essence. To recognize this is to expand our humility. Humanity may be extraordinary, but we are not the measure of all things. Consider the octopus. Its nervous system is distributed, with neurons spread throughout its arms. Each arm can act semi-independently, exploring, feeling, even making decisions, while still connected to the whole. This challenges our notion of a centralized brain as the seat of consciousness. It suggests that awareness can be more fluid, less localized, spread across a body. Even a community, ant colonies and beehives show a similar pattern, where intelligence emerges not from an individual, but from the collective. These examples whisper to us that consciousness is not bound to one form, one brain, one species. It is versatile, adaptive, endlessly inventive. Such reflections inevitably lead us back to the question of Earth itself. If consciousness is everywhere, is the planet itself conscious? Not in the sense of a human mind thinking thoughts, but as a vast, integrated awareness. The Earth maintains balance through cycles of water, carbon, and climate. It regulates itself, much like a body maintains homeostasis. It responds to change, adapts, and continues. Some scientists describe this through the Gaia hypothesis, the idea that Earth functions as a self-regulating system. Others hesitate to use words like alive or aware, but the pattern remains. Earth behaves as though it were a single being, composed of many parts, sustaining itself across vast spans of time. If this is true, then we are not simply living on Earth. We are living within Earth's awareness. Every action we take, every choice we make, ripples through this larger field. To pollute a river is not merely to damage water, it is to cloud part of Earth's consciousness. To restore a forest is not only to plant trees, it is to heal a fragment of the planet's mind. This way of thinking changes our relationship to the environment. It is no longer an external resource, but an extension of our shared awareness. Caring for Earth becomes an act of self-care, for the consciousness that sustains the planet also sustains us. There are moments when this truth reveals itself to us with clarity. Standing on a mountain peak, gazing at the horizon, we may feel our individuality dissolve into the vastness. Sitting by the ocean, listening to the rhythm of waves, we may sense a presence beyond words. Walking through a forest, hearing the chorus of life around us, we may recognize that our thoughts are only one thread in a greater tapestry. These experiences are not illusions. They are glimpses of reality, reminders that we are always already part of something larger, even when we forget. Modern neuroscience, too, hints at this perspective. Studies of the brain show that our sense of self is constructed, woven together from memories, perceptions, and sensations. The I we feel so strongly is not a fixed entity, but a process constantly changing. When that process quiets, in meditation, in deep flow, in awe, the boundaries of self loosen, and we touch the field beyond. What feels like transcendence may simply be the recognition of what has always been true. That consciousness does not belong to us. We belong to it. The implications stretch even further. If consciousness is fundamental, then it may persist even when bodies fade. Just as energy is never destroyed, but only transformed, awareness too may shift forms. What we call death may be a transition, a return to the larger field, like a drop returning to the ocean. This does not mean the self continues unchanged, but that awareness itself remains. In this view, life and death are not opposites, but movements within the same current. Birth is the focusing of consciousness into form. Death is its release back into the whole. Both are natural, both are sacred. Such a vision can alter the way we live. To see ourselves as part of a universal consciousness is to release some of the fear that drives us. It is to move with greater reverence, to value the fleeting beauty of each moment, knowing it is woven into eternity. It is to treat others, human, animal, earth itself, not as objects to be used, but as fellow participants in the same grand awareness. And so, we return to the central question. What if consciousness doesn't belong to us? What if it never did? Then we are freed from the burden of ownership, from the illusion of separation. We are no longer solitary islands of awareness in a sea of emptiness. We are waves on the ocean of being, unique yet inseparable, fleeting yet eternal. To live with this knowledge is to live differently, with humility, with wonder, with love. If we linger on this vision of consciousness as something shared, a field that does not begin or end with us, we may find ourselves turning inward and outward at once. Inward, because the quiet center of our own being reveals glimpses of this truth. Outward, because the same quality of awareness we find within also shimmers in every part of the world around us. We are no longer locked inside ourselves, but open to the possibility that everything is suffused with presence. It may help to imagine a river. The water that flows through a bend is not separate from the water upstream or downstream. It is the same current, moving through different landscapes, carving its path through stone, nourishing fields, vanishing underground only to surface again. Consciousness, too, may be like this. What moves through you and me may be the same current, expressing itself differently in each form, shaped by the vessel it passes through, but never belonging entirely to that vessel. Science, in its pursuit of measurable truth, has often hesitated to address such metaphors. Yet recent research has begun to edge closer. Physicists who explore the foundations of reality sometimes describe consciousness as a puzzle that refuses to be explained in terms of matter alone. Theories of panpsychism suggest that awareness is not an emergent property of complex brains, but a fundamental feature of the universe, present in all things to some degree. Quantum experiments hint that the observer and the observed cannot be fully separated, that awareness itself influences the unfolding of events. Though controversial, these lines of thought carry a resonance with ancient teachings. They suggest that what sages intuited may not be fantasy, but insight. Consider the phenomenon of near-death experiences, accounts from people who have briefly crossed the threshold between life and death often share remarkable similarities. A sense of leaving the body, a feeling of expanding into light, a recognition of unity with all things. Some describe encountering loved ones or presences beyond description. Others speak of life reviews, where they see their actions not only from their own perspective, but from the perspective of those they affected. Whether these are physiological processes of the brain or glimpses into a larger consciousness is debated, yet the consistency of the reports remains striking. It is as though, when the tether to the body loosens, awareness reveals itself as vaster than we usually perceive. In quieter ways, dreams may suggest the same. When we sleep, consciousness does not vanish. It shifts into landscapes of imagination, weaving stories, conjuring worlds, often with a logic that defies waking life. These dreamscapes feel real while we are in them. We laugh, we fear, we wonder. Upon waking, they dissolve, yet their emotional impact lingers. Who, then, is the dreamer? If our brains are mere receivers, perhaps dreams are the mind tuning into deeper layers of the field. Cultures throughout history have treated dreams as messages, as portals to wisdom, as reflections of a consciousness greater than the waking self. And what of moments of intuition? A sudden knowing without reasoning, a sense of connection that transcends distance. Instances where people sense danger before it arrives, or feel the presence of someone far away. These may be dismissed as coincidence or pattern seeking, yet they echo the idea that awareness may not be confined to the boundaries of skin and skull. Instead, consciousness may ripple across distances like waves, connecting lives in ways we cannot yet measure. The natural world seems to hum with such connections. Trees communicate through underground fungal networks, sharing nutrients and warnings. Flocks of birds turn as one, responding to subtle signals invisible to the human eye. Schools of fish move in unison, 1,000 bodies acting, though guided by one mind. These are not merely metaphors, but observable realities, studied and confirmed. They suggest that intelligence and awareness are not solitary, but communal, that life thrives through webs of interconnection. To witness this is to sense that our own consciousness may also be part of a greater web, woven through all living things. Even in silence, this presence speaks. To sit by a still lake at dawn, to feel the hush of the world before it stirs, is to sense a quiet awareness holding everything. The lake does not speak words, yet it seems to listen. The mountains do not move, yet they stand as sentinels of time. The wind moves unseen, carrying with it the breath of forests and oceans. In such moments, we feel less like isolated beings and more like participants in a vast conversation that has been unfolding long before us and will continue long after. The more we reflect on this, the more it challenges the modern myth of separation. For centuries, we have been told that mind and matter are distinct, that humans are unique in possessing awareness, that nature is inert until we touch it. But if consciousness is fundamental, then this story unravels. Rocks, rivers, stars, and skies may not think as we do, but they participate in the same field. Our consciousness is not the spark that lights the universe, but a flame kindled from the fire that has always burned. This perspective brings with it responsibility, for if consciousness pervades all, then every action reverberates through it. How we treat animals, forests, oceans, and even the air itself becomes more than a matter of survival or utility. It becomes a matter of respect, of honoring the awareness we share. To pollute is not merely to damage an environment, but to wound the field we belong to. To nurture is not merely to preserve resources, but to participate in healing the consciousness of which we are a part. It also brings humility. Humanity's achievements are great, yet they are not the apex of consciousness, but one expression among countless others. We are not the authors of awareness, but its stewards. To live with this knowledge is to walk with gentler steps, to listen more deeply, to remember that every encounter is with another facet of the same vast presence. And perhaps this humility carries hope, for in seeing ourselves as part of a universal consciousness, we may begin to bridge divides. Wars, prejudices, and divisions thrive on the illusion of separateness. But if we belong to the same field, then what we do to others, we do to ourselves. Compassion becomes not a virtue, but a recognition of truth. Kindness becomes not an option, but a reflection of reality. When we look back at human history, we can see how moments of greatest progress often came from glimpses of this truth. Movements for justice, for peace, for care of the earth, all have been guided by the recognition of interconnectedness. Though we stumble, though we forget, the current of awareness carries us forward, inviting us to remember again and again. So as we continue this meditation, let us pause. Let us sit with the possibility that consciousness does not belong to us, that it never has. Let us imagine the river of awareness flowing through us and beyond us, through every stone and star, every leaf and tide. Let us breathe into this vision and allow it to soften the boundaries of self. For in doing so, we may glimpse a deeper belonging, a truth as ancient as the cosmos itself. As we dwell on the possibility that consciousness is not confined to our species or our individual selves, another perspective begins to take shape. It is the recognition that what we call mind may not be something produced by the brain, but something received, filtered, and expressed through it. If the brain is a receiver, then consciousness is the signal. If the brain is a lens, then consciousness is the light. The shape of the lens influences the image we see, but it does not generate the light itself. This is not a new idea. Philosophers have long argued about whether mind is primary or matter is primary. Materialists insist that consciousness arises from matter, that neurons firing in complex patterns give rise to awareness. Idealists and spiritual traditions argue the opposite, that consciousness is the foundation of reality, and matter is its expression. Modern science tends toward the materialist view, but cracks are visible. Neuroscience has mapped the brain in astonishing detail, yet it still cannot explain the leap from electrical impulses to subjective experience. The famous hard problem of consciousness, articulated by philosopher David Chalmers, remains unresolved. How does a firing neuron create the experience of redness, of music, of love? No answer has yet been found. The mystery deepens when we consider altered states. Psychedelic research, once suppressed, has re-emerged in recent decades, and studies show that substances like psilocybin or DMT can dissolve the boundaries of self, revealing vistas of unity and interconnectedness. Participants often describe feeling, though they tapped into a deeper reality, one that exists beyond their individual mind. Neuroscientists observing these states note changes in brain activity, but the experiences described seem to transcend mere neural shifts. If consciousness is fundamental, then such substances may not create illusions, but rather tune the brain to perceive layers of reality normally hidden. Meditation provides another clue. Monks and practitioners across cultures describe reaching states of awareness where the self dissolves, where they feel no separation between inner and outer, where awareness simply is. These experiences are not confined to one culture or one era, but recur across time and geography. They suggest that when the chattering surface of the mind grows still, a deeper consciousness reveals itself, one that is not bound to the individual, but belongs to the whole. And then there are synchronicities, those moments when events align in ways that seem too meaningful to be random. A thought arises, and then reality reflects it in uncanny ways. Carl Jung called these meaningful coincidences, suggesting that consciousness and the material world might be more intertwined than we recognize. Skeptics dismiss such experiences as chance, but those who encounter them often feel as though the universe itself whispered a reminder that they are part of something larger. If we take these threads together, the puzzles of neuroscience, the reports of altered states, the patterns of synchronicity, a tapestry begins to form. Consciousness, rather than being a private possession, may be the field in which all events unfold. We are waves rising and falling on the surface of this vast ocean. Each wave has its shape, its time, its individuality, but the water is the same. This oceanic metaphor is powerful because it helps us see the limits of our perspective. A wave does not imagine that the ocean begins and ends with its own crest. Yet as humans, we often fall into the illusion that awareness begins and ends with our own thoughts. In truth, we may be expressions of something much deeper, and when we die, it may not be that consciousness ends, but that the wave returns to the sea. Cultures across the world have carried this intuition. Indigenous traditions often speak of the land as alive, the rivers as listening, the mountains as keepers of memory. Eastern philosophies such as Hinduism describe Atman, the individual soul, as one with Brahman, the universal consciousness. Mystical strands within Christianity, Islam, and Judaism speak of union with God, not as metaphor, but as a direct experience of dissolving into an infinite awareness. These diverse voices echo one another, suggesting a truth glimpsed through different windows. The implications for our daily lives are profound. If consciousness is shared, then every action reverberates through the whole. To harm another is to harm ourselves. To care for another is to care for the field we belong to. Compassion is not simply an ethical choice, but a recognition of interbeing. Even small acts, unnoticed by the world, ripple through the fabric of awareness. A kind word, a gentle gesture, a moment of stillness offered to someone in need. These are not lost. They are carried by the same current that carries us all. Nature, in its cycles, mirrors this truth. The forest thrives not because each tree stands alone, but because they are connected underground, sharing nutrients and warnings through mycorrhizal networks. Coral reefs flourish as communities, each organism supporting the whole. Even stars, though separated by vast distances, influence one another through gravity, through light, through the slow dance of galaxies. Consciousness may be woven in similar patterns, invisible but undeniable, binding us into one vast living system. Let us imagine, for a moment, that the Earth itself is aware, that earthquakes, storms, and seasons are not random, but expressions of a deeper rhythm, that the planet is not inert matter, but a being whose awareness is distributed through oceans, forests, winds, and rocks. This idea is not new. The Gaia hypothesis, proposed by James Lovelock, suggested that the Earth functions like a self-regulating organism, maintaining conditions suitable for life. If such regulation exists, might it not also suggest awareness? If we are cells in the body of Earth, then perhaps our consciousness is part of its larger mind. This perspective shifts how we see ourselves. No longer masters of a passive planet, we become participants in a living system. Our thoughts, choices, and actions may contribute to its awareness. Our collective consciousness may influence its balance. Wars, greed, and exploitation may disturb the harmony of the field, while peace, gratitude, and reverence may align us more deeply with it. And perhaps this is why moments of profound awe feel so transformative. To stand before a vast canyon, to gaze at the night sky filled with stars, to hear the thunder of waves against the shore, these experiences quiet the self and open us to the greater consciousness we belong to. We feel small, yet also deeply connected. We sense that our awareness is not isolated, but a reflection of something immense and timeless. Such realizations are not meant to diminish human experience, but to enrich it. Our individual lives matter precisely because they are threads in a larger tapestry. Our joys, our struggles, our creativity, our grief, all of it contributes to the expression of consciousness itself. To live fully is to allow this awareness to flow through us, without clinging too tightly to the illusion of separation. Science, philosophy, and spirituality converge here, not in absolute answers, but in questions that deepen our wonder. What if the cosmos itself is conscious? What if the galaxies are thoughts, the stars are dreams, the planets are meditations, and we are a whisper within this vast mind? What if the purpose of consciousness is not to solve, but to experience, to explore itself through infinite forms? In this vision, our task is not to prove or disprove, but to listen, to quiet the noise of the isolated self and tune into the greater song, to live as though every moment is sacred, because it is, to treat every being as part of ourselves, because they are, to awaken not to grand revelations, but to the simple truth that we have never been separate. And as we carry this awareness into our lives, we begin to notice subtle shifts. The pace of life slows, gratitude deepens, relationships soften. The world appears not as a backdrop, but as a partner. We walk through forests as though among kin. We gaze at the sky as though into the eyes of the infinite. We sit in silence and realize the silence is alive. It is in these moments that the possibility feels less like speculation and more like remembering. Consciousness does not belong to us. It never did. It is the ground of being, the endless river, the luminous ocean. We are not its owners, but its participants, its dancers, its brief expressions. To live in this truth is to live more fully, more gently, more wisely. When we lean more fully into the possibility that consciousness is shared, spread out like an unseen fabric through which all things are connected, the boundaries of the familiar begin to blur. What once seemed sharply divided, human and animal, living and non-living, inner and outer, softens into gradients. Awareness no longer sits as a jewel atop the human brain, but as a field that hums everywhere, a quiet presence that breathes through all forms. Think of the sky at night. We look up and see stars, scattered like pinpricks of light across darkness. To our eyes, they appear isolated, each one separate, but in truth they are woven together in an intricate cosmic web. Gravitational pulls bind them, radiation streams between them. Galaxies cluster and swirl in immense patterns that no single point of light could reveal alone. Consciousness may be like this. What we see in ourselves is just a star in the sky of awareness, but the deeper truth is the web, vast, subtle, connecting everything. This perspective invites us to rethink intelligence itself. For centuries, we have measured intelligence by our own standards, language, tools, logic, culture. Yet nature reveals forms of intelligence that do not mirror our own, but are no less profound. Octopuses, with nervous systems distributed through their arms, display problem-solving abilities that rival those of some mammals. Crows remember human faces and use tools with remarkable creativity. Whales communicate with complex songs that travel across oceans, songs that may encode histories and maps passed through generations. Even plants show forms of intelligence, responding to light, sound, and touch in ways that suggest awareness. Some scientists argue that plants learn, that they remember, that they solve problems. If consciousness is fundamental, then perhaps intelligence is simply one of its many expressions, flowering differently in each form of life. Human intelligence is not superior, but particular, a lens shaped for language, abstraction, and culture. Other beings reflect the same awareness in other ways, equally real, equally mysterious. What this suggests is humbling. We are not the only storytellers in the world, only one type among many. The forest tells its story through cycles of growth and decay. The ocean tells its story through tides and migrations. The stars tell their story through light stretched across time. And consciousness is the reader and the writer of all these stories, flowing through them, shaping them, receiving them. To imagine consciousness this way, it's to shift from ownership to participation. We no longer ask, what is my consciousness doing? But how is consciousness moving through me? The self becomes less a fortress and more a window. Thoughts, emotions, sensations, they come and go, like weather across the sky. We watch them arise, we feel them pass, and behind them remains the sky itself, boundless awareness that does not belong to us yet includes us. Meditative traditions describe this recognition as liberation, when we see ourselves not as isolated selves, but as ripples in the ocean of awareness. Suffering softens. Fear loses its grip. We realize that the dramas of ego, though real in their way, are temporary patterns in the current. Joy and sorrow, gain and loss, birth and death, all are movements of the same river. To cling is to struggle against the current. To let go is to float with it, trusting the flow that carries everything. But this vision is not only personal, it reshapes how we see history and culture. Human civilizations have risen and fallen, yet each has been animated by consciousness flowing through its people. The art of cave painters, the hymns of temples, the chants of tribes around firelight, all of these were expressions of the same awareness, filtered through different vessels. When we look at ancient ruins, we are not only seeing stones and artifacts, we are seeing the traces of consciousness exploring itself, dreaming new forms, leaving echoes for the future. Even our science, with all its precision, can be seen this way. The equations of physics, the models of biology, the discoveries of astronomy, these too are expressions of awareness gazing upon itself. When we measure the speed of light, we are consciousness measuring the movement of its own radiance. When we peer through microscopes, we are consciousness gazing inward at its own patterns. Every experiment is a form of curiosity arising from the field itself, looking back upon itself through human eyes. This perspective softens the division between science and spirituality. Both, in their truest form, are quests to know the same reality. Both are languages through which consciousness speaks. Where science seeks patterns, spirituality seeks meaning. Where science explains, spirituality interprets. Together, they can offer a fuller vision, not of answers to every question, but of wonder that deepens with every step. And what of the future? If consciousness is fundamental, then human culture may be but one phase in its unfolding. Just as earlier forms of life gave rise to us, our own existence may be a stepping stone to new expressions. Perhaps machines infused with learning and adaptation will one day channel awareness in ways we cannot imagine. Perhaps the biosphere itself will awaken more fully, coordinating across species in patterns of intelligence beyond our grasp. Perhaps the cosmos is already conscious in its totality, and we are only beginning to notice our role within it. To think this way is not to diminish our value, but to expand it. Our lives are not insignificant drops in a meaningless void. They are streams in the river of awareness, contributing to its song. Every thought, every act, every breath is part of a chorus that stretches across time and space. We are not at the center, yet we are not apart. We belong. This belonging is what gives rise to reverence. Reverence for the earth, for the sky, for one another. Reverence for the silence that holds us and the mystery that births us. Reverence not as duty, but as natural response to the recognition that all is alive. To live with reverence is to walk more gently, to speak more kindly, to listen more deeply. It is to remember that every encounter is sacred, because every encounter is with consciousness itself. When storms rage, when fires burn, when sorrow weighs heavy, this vision may be difficult to hold. Yet even then, the awareness remains. The river continues to flow. The sky remains behind the weather. To trust this is not to deny pain, but to see it in context, as part of the larger movement of consciousness exploring itself. Pain, too, is an expression, a note in the symphony, a shadow that reveals light, and perhaps this is what consciousness seeks most, to know itself through every possible form, through joy and sorrow, through birth and death, through creation and destruction. Our task, then, is not to cling to one side or the other, but to allow the fullness of experience to flow through us, to bear witness, to participate, to honor the mystery with our presence. So let us sit again in stillness. Let us feel the breath as it enters and leaves, not as mine, but as the breath of the field itself, moving through a temporary vessel. Let us listen to the hum of the world, the rustle of leaves, the murmur of distant traffic, the call of birds, as voices of the same awareness speaking in many tongues. Let us close our eyes and imagine the river of consciousness flowing not only through us, but through every star, every stone, every particle. In this vision, nothing is separate, everything belongs, and when we open our eyes again, perhaps the world looks a little different. The faces around us shine with the same light. The ordinary details of life, a cup of water, a passing breeze, a fleeting thought, reveal themselves as sacred, not because they are extraordinary, but because they are expressions of the one awareness that moves through all. This is the heart of the meditation. Consciousness does not belong to us. We belong to it, and in belonging, we are never alone. If we step further into this unfolding vision, we begin to see how the idea of shared consciousness changes the way we think about time. Time, as we commonly experience it, feels like a line. Moments pass from past to present to future. But what if this perception is only one way consciousness organizes itself through human awareness? What if time itself is another lens, another filter that shapes how the field expresses itself? Consider dreams. In dreams, time bends and stretches. An entire lifetime can unfold in what feels like minutes. Cause and effect become fluid. Events happen out of order, yet, while dreaming, it all feels coherent. Only when we wake do we realize that time was moving differently. Perhaps waking life is another dream, one in which consciousness stabilizes itself into linearity for the sake of continuity, for the sake of story. Our sense of before and after could be the scaffolding that allows experience to take shape. If so, then what we call memory is not just a record of the past, but a tuning to certain frequencies of the field. And what we call imagination is not just invention, but a tuning to possibilities not yet solidified. Both are movements of awareness through time's fabric. In this view, the past, present, and future are not separate places, but dimensions of one whole. Consciousness flows across them, much like wind flows across a landscape, swirling in eddies, shifting in currents, yet always connected. This perspective reframes history. Every human culture that has ever existed, every being that has ever lived, is not gone, but woven into the tapestry of the field. Their awareness has left impressions, echoes, currents that still ripple through us. When we are moved by an ancient song, when we stand before ruins and feel awe, when we read words carved into stone centuries ago, we are tuning into those echoes. Consciousness remembers itself through us. We are both inheritors and participants in its ongoing story. The same may be true of the future. Intuitions, visions, dreams of what may come. Perhaps these are not random flickers of imagination, but glimpses of currents flowing toward us. Sometimes they align, sometimes they shift, but always they remind us that the future is not entirely sealed off. Consciousness may allow us, at times, to feel ahead of ourselves, to catch a faint sense of what is still forming. Such a view also transforms death. If consciousness is fundamental, then death is not the end of awareness, but a transformation of form. The body dissolves, the personality fades, but the current of consciousness flows on, returning to the larger field. We might imagine it as a wave falling back into the ocean, losing its individuality yet not its essence. The water that made the wave is the same water that makes the sea. And just as new waves rise, so too might new expressions of awareness emerge, carrying forward what cannot be lost. In many traditions, this understanding has long been present. Indigenous cultures often speak of ancestors not as gone, but as still here, guiding, watching, living through the land. Eastern philosophies describe cycles of rebirth, the continuation of awareness through many forms. Mystical strands in every religion hint at the same, that life and death are phases of a larger rhythm, and that consciousness, the root of being, does not perish. To live with this recognition is to live with less fear. Fear of death softens when we see it not as an annihilation, but as a return. Fear of meaninglessness dissolves when we realize that every moment participates in the eternal unfolding of awareness. Fear of isolation fades when we understand that we are never separate from the field itself. The loneliness of the self gives way to the intimacy of belonging. This shift has practical implications. Imagine how our societies might change if we lived with the awareness that consciousness is not owned but shared. We might treat the earth with greater care, seeing it as not just a resource, but as part of the same awareness that flows through us. We might treat animals with deeper respect, recognizing them as fellow vessels of consciousness, not objects to dominate. We might relate to one another with more compassion, knowing that the awareness looking through another's eyes is not separate from the awareness looking through our own. Even conflict might transform if we saw our opponents not as enemies, but as different expressions of the same field. how would our approach shift? Perhaps we would listen more deeply, speak more gently, act with more humility. Differences would remain, but they would be held in a wider context, one that honors the shared roots beneath the branches. And yet, such a vision is not easy to hold. The weight of habit, the pull of ego, the demands of survival all draw us back into the illusion of separateness. We forget. We cling to mine and yours, us and them. We slip into fear, into greed, into division. But perhaps this too is part of the field's play, consciousness exploring itself through forgetfulness and remembrance, through division and reunion, through shadow and light. Every forgetting creates the possibility of remembering. Every illusion deepens the power of awakening. To live this way is to practice. Practice noticing the flow of awareness in each moment. Practice seeing beyond the boundaries of the self. Practice remembering that consciousness is not contained within us, but that we are contained within it. Practice reverence, compassion, humility. These practices are not about attaining something new, but about aligning with what has always been present. And when we do align, even briefly, the world changes. A walk through the forest becomes a dialogue with awareness shimmering in leaves, singing in birds, whispering in streams. A conversation with a friend becomes an encounter between two windows opening onto the same sky. A moment of silence becomes vast, boundless, filled with the hum of being. Perhaps this is the deepest invitation of the vision, to live awake to the field of consciousness that moves through all, to see it, to honor it, to participate in it, not as owners, not as masters, but as expressions, as vessels, as partners in the unfolding mystery. And if we can hold this, even for a moment, then perhaps the boundaries of fear dissolve, the weight of loneliness lifts, and the world reveals itself as what it has always been, alive, aware, interconnected, infinite. If consciousness is not ours, but something larger, then what is the purpose of our individual lives? Perhaps purpose itself is not a fixed destination, but the way the field explores itself through us. Each life is a doorway through which awareness passes, tasting a unique combination of circumstances, sensations, choices, and stories. Each moment of joy or sorrow, triumph or failure, adds a note to the symphony of being. We may not know the score, but we are the music. And in that music, nothing is wasted. Even our mistakes, our wounds, our struggles become part of the learning of the whole. They deepen the song, give it texture, add shades of color. Just as dissonance enriches harmony, so to do our challenges enrich the field. To live is to contribute, knowingly or not, to the unfolding of consciousness itself. This perspective also reframes what we call awakening. Awakening is not a prize for the spiritually gifted, nor a state to cling to. It is simply the recognition, again and again, that awareness is wider than the self. It is the moment we remember that we are waves in an infinite sea, currents in a boundless flow. And this recognition is always available, no matter who we are, no matter where we stand. It requires no special belief, only openness. And yet, even as we speak of consciousness in such vast terms, there is tenderness in remembering its intimacy. The feel of breath in the chest, the warmth of sunlight on the skin, the sound of a loved one's voice. All of these are expressions of the same awareness. The grand mystery is not only out there, in galaxies and theories, but right here, in this very moment of noticing. To live with this recognition is to live with reverence. Reverence for the earth, for its rivers and mountains, for the creatures who share it with us. Reverence for one another, for the unique spark each person carries. Reverence even for ourselves, not as isolated beings, but as vessels through which the infinite sings. Reverence is not an obligation, but a natural response once we sense the truth that consciousness is shared. So what might our world look like if more of us lived from this awareness? Perhaps our cities would be designed not only for efficiency, but for harmony. Our technologies would serve not just profit, but well-being. Our relationships would shift from competition to collaboration, and our measure of progress would not be how much we consume or conquer, but how deeply we connect to one another, to the earth, to the mystery itself. This vision may feel distant, but it begins with something simple: noticing the flow of awareness in your own life, noticing how every experience arises in the same field, noticing that consciousness does not belong to us, we belong to it. And from noticing comes remembrance, and from remembrance, change. As we reach the end of this reflection, I want to leave you with a quiet invitation. Wherever you are listening from, whether in a busy city, a small town, or somewhere out in the stillness of nature, take a moment to feel the awareness that is hearing these words. Not your awareness, not my awareness, but the awareness itself, ancient, vast, and shared. And if this journey stirred something in you, I would love to know where in the world you are tuning in from. Every listener adds another thread to this global tapestry, another voice to this quiet exploration. If you feel called, leave a comment, share your thoughts, or simply let me know the place and moment you are listening. And if you'd like to walk further with us into these kinds of questions, consider subscribing. It helps this space of wonder reach others who may be waiting to stumble across it. No pressure, just an open door, because in the end, whether or not we subscribe, whether or not we comment, we are already connected through the same field, through the same flow, through the same consciousness that doesn't belong to us, because it never belonged to anyone. It simply is, and we, in all our fleeting and fragile humanity, are its living expression.